Life Audio.
I want to make it clear, like, this isn't a story of struggle. This isn't a story of pain or hardship or depression or anxiety or abuse or neglect. You're going to find all of those elements in the story. Mm-hmm. But really what this is a story about is overcoming it all.
Welcome to episode 31 of the Get Your Brave On podcast with my good friend, Sara Beth. She is my personal trainer. She's my nutritionist. She is my mindset coach. She's the reason why I can do what I do for you, my Get Your Brave On babes. She's about to share for the very first time her personal story of escaping human trafficking and overcoming abuse and neglect as a child. This is not a tragedy. This is a story about how to not allow yourself to be defined by your past, but to allow your past to define you as a conqueror. This is an extremely special episode, and I can't wait for you to hear the story of Sara Beth and how she became the mother that she's always needed. You're not a victim. You are a brave warrior. If this podcast makes an impact on you, we'd love for you to share it with a friend. Also, follow it on whatever platform you're listening to so you don't miss the next episode. This is a 2-part, maybe even a 3-part series. And then please let us know what you think by leaving a review, and we'll shout you out in the next episode.
How to become the mother that you have always needed. This is a story that needs to be told in a very powerful way that more people need to hear. Sara, let's just start off big. What was the motivation for learning the kind of mother that I'm going to be is the kind of mother that I needed? Is that because that's what you didn't have?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely grew up in a way that left me, wanting more from motherhood. I don't have really any memories of the nurturing, loving mother that we see in the movies or we read about in books, or that maybe even my friends had. I really don't have any of those memories. And my childhood was a struggle and unique in that way. And I knew from a very young age that if I was put on this planet to do one thing, it was to be a mom. Mm-hmm. And I always knew I'd have kids, and I always knew that I would do it differently. And I have. My mom had 5 kids, and she never wanted any. I was craving and needing that loving support and didn't have it. And I remember even as a young child thinking, when I'm a mom, I'm going to do this. I'm generation after generation in this small town that's overrun with drugs and meth and it's very high levels of poverty. And if I had a terrible childhood, my mother had it worse. You can't understand how a mother could possibly treat her children this way, how a mother could possibly show up in this way. But as I've gone through, my own healing journey, what I've really come to realize is she did the best she could. We're all just doing our best. Yeah. I can see now that in her mind, how bad could our childhood really have been, because it wasn't as bad as hers.
Oh, that's really interesting. Well, at least you're breaking the cycle. I understand some of that. I'm a 3rd generation single mom. My grandmother, she became a widow in 1955. And raised 4 kids. And then my mother went through a divorce. And then no, I want to break the cycle for my children.
The generational curse is what we call it, right? And it really truly is I'm like a 5th generation single mom. and there was a point in my young adult life where I thought to myself, maybe there's some sort of cosmic curse on my family. No. The women in my family, just single motherhood, we're destined for this. And maybe that's likely not true. But the reality is it doesn't have to be, we don't have to be a victim to that circumstance, and maybe I am a single mom, and maybe my mom was before me and her mom before that, but we get to break the generational curse that allowed that single parent struggle to define us. I mean, I wouldn't change it for the world.
Help us understand maybe what are some of the poignant moments in your childhood that said, I don't want to be that kind of mother. Yeah. I want to be something different.
Yeah. I think that the answer to that question really goes with just kind of outlining some pieces of the story and giving you a picture of really how I grew up so you can see. But before I do that, I want to make it clear, like, this isn't a story of struggle. This isn't a story of pain or hardship or depression or anxiety or abuse or neglect. You're going to find all of those elements in the story. Mm-hmm. But really what this is a story about is overcoming it all, is not being a victim to that circumstance. And even, before I start, I'll say, even as a young child, while I was going in these moments as a child going through this, never did I feel sorry for myself. Never did I feel like this isn't fair or why me or any of those things. It didn't even occur to me to feel that way because it was just life. And it didn't occur to me that this wasn't how everybody's life was.
It was you thought it was normal.
I thought it was very normal. And that saved me in a way because, when we allow ourselves to become a victim to the circumstance, it really defines us and it controls us. And every action we take, we're taking as a victim and allowing our circumstance or the people in it to be that villain. Struggle is relative. It's relative. We all go through it in one way or another. I don't know a single person who doesn't have a story from their childhood that defined a way that they interact in the world today or use on the flip end, use as a crutch. And the reality is we all go through something. And my story that I'm about to go through, it's not any worse than yours. For me, it feels bad because it's mine, and so pain and struggle is relative. And I think that that's a really important, this isn't a struggle competition, right?
I like that. It's like it's not about comparing our stories. This is about inspiring you to overcome whatever your story is, because that's what I think bravery is. That's why I talk about bravery, because it's not that we're not scared. It's moving forward while we're experiencing fear. And it's about understanding that this is not the thing that defines you. How am I going to overcome? How am I going to use this thing to propel me forward and make me a better person? That's why I always say, get your brave on. It's a decision. It's a choice. It's an action. It's like a favorite outfit.
I love that.
I'm going to put my brave on today. How did you have to put your brave on through your childhood? Earliest?
I am the second to the oldest of 5 girls. And my mom had my oldest sister when she was 17. Oh. So she was a teenage mom and, a teenager to a mom who was definitely not a mom. I think that it really started when my parents got divorced. My dad was truly, he died when I was 14, but he was truly my hero. We unfortunately grew up in a time where he lived 4 hours away and it's not like we had cell phones or text messaging or anything like that. So it's this way that like you can't really see what's happening. And so you live in this way of denial of like, you don't want to believe that your kids are living this life, but they are. And so it's been only summers with him, but they got divorced when I was 3. And my mom, by the time I was 6, my mom had my youngest 2 sisters. Okay. So there were 5 of us. And as I mentioned already, she didn't want to be a mom, and she was young, and the neglect is what comes.
Okay.
And so my mom would leave for days and weeks at a time. And we lived in this little tiny trailer in the middle of nowhere, California. And at 7 years old, me, my older sister, and then the one right under me is only a year younger. So the 3 of us were really responsible for this toddler and an infant, and she would leave. I remember changing diapers and coddling babies in the middle of the night when they had nightmares.
How old were you?
7, 8, 9. Those were really between the ages of 7 and 12. That was really, those ages were around, survival. survival, because we were extremely poor, lived in extreme poverty, extremely neglected.
Yeah.
We didn't know where our next meal was going to come from. We didn't have hot water. We didn't have insulation or heating and air. And so, it was really about leaning on each other and then maybe this is why I'm like such a woman tribe advocate.
Yes, me too.
We're leaning on each other as very young children to survive. And really, it turns out survival is an instinct. And when you need it and you need to tap into it, we all have it. Mm-hmm. And as very young children, we are, some examples is like, we didn't have heat. And in the winter, it was so cold, you could see your breath in the house. And so we would all pile in make a pallet on the floor of the living room, and we'd all sleep in the same spot, and we use our body heat to keep each other warm and things like this. And so I remember in these moments, taking care of these babies and figuring out how we're going to eat and how we're going to get to school. And it was the craving of just somebody to love and somebody who loved us. And that was probably the very first thing that comes to mind when you say, what are some of the key memories? It was this through line through my entire childhood of the absence of love. And I was very aware of the absence of love. And as a young child, that's all I ever wanted, was to be seen, to be heard, to be for somebody to care. And I don't have any memories of feeling like that was ever satiated or fulfilled.
So you were in this cycle of neglect.
Yes.
Your mom would leave, and then you became mom to your younger siblings.
Yeah.
How long did this cycle continue, and what was the next level when you became a teenager?
Yeah.
Things must have changed.
So, it's interesting how things change. My mom, her story, if she were to be the one on the other end of this mic, her story would be one of awe and inspiration. And people would listen to this story and they would take something from it. Because in a nutshell, her story is, I was a single mom of 5 girls. I put myself through nursing school. And I did the best I could raising them. Mm-hmm. And they grew up to be these, very successful and wonderful women. And I'm really proud of that. And one thing I learned from my mom that I'm grateful for every day is that there's nothing in this world that if I'm willing to sacrifice something, there's nothing in this world I can't achieve or have. The problem was she was willing to sacrifice us.
Yeah.
And that came through very much. So oftentimes she was gone because of men, and more often she was gone because of school.
Okay.
Nonetheless, we were left to fend for ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
So when I was 11, my older sister moved out, and she's 3 years older than me. So she was 14.
Wow.
And my mom graduated nursing school. So she was a little bit more grounded and a little bit more around, but still not much. When she wasn't at work, the men were still very much occupying her time and not home because of that. Or if she was home, she was locked in her bedroom.
Okay.
And in those moments too, I can see the memories of her being locked in her bedroom. You're home. Why don't you want to hang out with us?
Yeah.
And thinking God, how can you not want to be around your kids? But then just stepping in and making the most of it. Sometimes when she'd be home, it was worse than when she was gone. And we would go and take our blankets and our pillows, and we'd go out into the field across the street, and we'd make a little picnic blanket, and we would stay out there until she left again, because it was worse to have her there than it was to have her gone. And we knew how to do it when she wasn't there, but when she was there, it was the pull of wanting her attention became the primary objective. Whereas when she was gone, the primary objective was leaning on each other and surviving and making it through.
And then were you like competing with your other sisters to get mom's love?
No, because none of us got it.
Okay.
So we weren't really competing for it. It was more just like, have you ever been around somebody who you really want their love and attention, and when you're not receiving it, there's this like sadness in your body?
Yeah, I've been in relationships like that.
Yeah, I think we all
a couple
have, right?
boyfriends, just kidding.
And so that's really more of what it was. It was like, instead of just putting one foot in front of the other and doing what we needed to do, it was this sadness that took our vibration down, and this knocking on her door, and like, wanting, and that never coming to fruition. Like it never was, for any reason, was all in vain. And so not having her there became better than having her there. So when she graduated nursing school, she was there more, but still gone a lot. And then it was really just the four of us. Even after she graduated nursing school and had a job, we still had no food.
Wow, that's crazy. Yeah.
We still had no food. We had, I guess, more, I will say this. I am a professional at walking into a kitchen with the bare minimum groceries and making like a gourmet meal.
Wow.
I have experience here.
Overcoming. We're focused on overcoming. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And so she struggled with eating disorders and whatnot. So she didn't really keep food in the house. And as I got older, the resentment started setting in. As a young kid, you don't really even realize this isn't how it's supposed to be. But as I got older, 11, 12, I got really sick when I was 12, 13, 14. I start seeing like, no, why? This isn't how it's supposed to be. And the anger starts setting in and the resentment starts setting in. And then when she's home and in the rare occasions where she tries to mother after being gone for my entire life, it's really like a laughable. Like, why would I listen to you? Why would I listen to you? I've just been doing this on my own for 10 years. Why am I listening to you now? And so we had a really, really challenged relationship. So if I ever wanted her love as a child, I pretended to not want it as a prepubescent teen.
Did you compare yourself to like other friends at school? And did it dawn on you when you see your friends and their relationships with their parents? And you're like, wait a second.
Yeah, absolutely.
That must have been hard.
Absolutely. Especially, I have one friend that comes to mind specifically. She was my best friend growing up in high school, and her mom also had like 5 or 6 kids, and they were also lived in extreme poverty. And when I'd go to her house, they always had food. Everybody was happy. They loved each other so much. Her mom was like her best friend.
Yeah.
And that example was one of the key moments. That woman, her name was Nancy. That woman showed me for the first time what it would look like if you just had a mom who was your best friend.
Yeah.
And I knew at the young child, a prepubescent teen, like, when I'm a mom, she will be my best friend.
Oh, there you go.
And there was always these things. When I'm a mom, my kids are going to have dinner every night. They're going to have the best lunches. They're going to be so clean, and I would just think of these things. I got to see Nancy just put on the super mom cape. And, my mom, one of the other things that my mom was really, really good at was manipulating people. And she is incredibly likable and had this way of just, no matter what she said, she had people just eating out of the palm of her hand. And as a kid, I'm watching this like, what is happening? How are you not seeing through this, And she is just a professional liar and a professional manipulator. And you'd see that come through so strongly in her relationships professionally, in her relationships with the people at school. And it blew my mind. And so comparing my my best friend's mom, Nancy, to my mom, I'm like, she doesn't have to lie at all. And she's this incredible mom. And my mom's telling all of these lies and she is just gone. And so there was, I spent a lot of time at that house. She was like my second mom.
I'm glad you had that.
Yeah. She was like my second mom. And then,
so did you leave the household at an early age then as a teenager?
Yeah.
Like your sister?
Yes. I left at 14 as well.
Oh.
And so 14 or 15.
Like how does that work when your mom's not fully engaged? It's not like, like we think on raising our daughters, we have daughters about the same age, that we're like going to pack them up and take them to college and help them move into their dorm room. Like, I'm guessing that wasn't the situation.
Definitely not.
Was it just like, I'm not going to stay here anymore? And did your mom know?
Yeah. So when I was 14, my dad died.
Oh, that's right.
And that changed me. It changed me majorly. Like, I went from kind of tolerating my mother and just kind of rolling my eyes at her little things that she'd do to hating her.
Okay.
And I blamed her a lot for the lost time I had with him.
Okay.
And I mean, and rightfully so in some ways, but nonetheless, I was ugly. I was ugly to her. And some may say she deserved it, but as I've done my own healing and growth through my adult life, I know like that was grief. It was grief, and I needed help processing that grief because I had no idea how to do that, and it was overtaking me, and it spiraled me into the start of a lifelong struggle with depression. And in this depression and in this grief and in this anger, there's so much anger, I couldn't be there anymore. And exactly, I think honestly, she was like, when my older sister moved out, she let her go. And when I moved out, she just let me go.
Yeah.
When my younger sister moved out, she just let us go. I mean, I think there was a part of her that was probably just relieved to be rid of that part, you know?
Well, where do you go when you're 14 and you move out of the house?
I am lucky to have had some really great friends and lucky to have had some really great school counselors.
Okay.
I always say that if I grew up in a big city, I probably would have grown up in foster care.
Because someone would have noticed. That was another question I had. Like, no one noticed what was going on with this family? Okay.
I mean, well, they did, but in conversation with my mom, it, like I said, she just had this way of like they just could talk and get like people to see it differently, and it worked every time. And so there was the career center counselor at my high school was also an angel in my life at this time, and she really supported me and helped me in making sure that I always had a roof over my head and that I had somebody to talk to. And she couldn't save me, but she could be there for me. And then, I had my best friend and her mom, and I spent a lot of time at other people's houses. And then when I was 15, I moved in with my boyfriend. The problem was I was 15 and he was 18, and he was incredibly abusive.
Oh, no.
And that was the very first experience I had in being in a relationship. And this man used to beat me senseless all the time. I was just looking at my daughter. Thank you. I was just looking at my daughter the other day with her boyfriend. She's 14 going on 15, and she's got her first boyfriend. And I walk into her room and she's crying, and he's there. And I was like, are you crying?
Like, what'd you do?
Yeah.
You're like, what did you do? Yeah.
And I just stopped. I go, are you crying?
Yeah.
And she like wipes her tears away and doesn't answer. And I look at him and I go, are you being nice to her? And then she goes, he's being sweet. And I go, oh, okay, good. And I just kind of leave them be. And I come out and I'm talking to my girlfriend who's at my house. And I'm like, gosh, I look at her with her first boyfriend and I see this boy being so sweet and they're so innocent. And my daughter in some ways is wise beyond her years, way surpassed where I was when I was her age, and in other ways just incredibly innocent, so much more innocent than I was. And I couldn't imagine her having a boyfriend who beat her up.
Yeah. Oh, I would go crazy. Yeah.
And I was that age.
That's crazy.
I was that age, and I had spent my entire life searching for love. Just wanting to be loved, just wanting to be seen, literally wanting to be physically held.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I didn't have that as a kid. I don't have a single memory of my mom hugging me or snuggling me. Not a single one. And so as I got older, I really craved just hugs and physical touch and being held. When you've lived your entire life with abuse and neglect, and your very first experience in a relationship is physical abuse, like, while I knew it wasn't okay, I also didn't occur to me that it was that bad.
Yeah.
Right? Because I didn't really have much good to compare it to. And my dad had just died, and I was grieving. And there was this man who sometimes, when he wasn't beating me up, he did want to hug me and love me.
And he had food.
And he had and a roof and a family.
It makes sense. So how did you get out of that relationship?
Well, it ended really ugly. And I got beat up a lot. And then when I was later in my teenage years, I ended up, this man had taken me into a position in my life. And this is a little bit hard to talk about. You don't want to talk about where I was essentially a prisoner and couldn't get out of that situation of being held prisoner in a junkyard in Santa Rosa.
This is not fathomable to me. And I know Sara did share this story with me before we're recording this podcast. So I do know some of this, and I'm being very careful at not prying too hard, but allowing you to share what you want to share about it, because, and I don't feel like you should share everything, but there's something in it that's going to be the thing that somebody else needs to hear to feel okay and to feel like they can do it too.
Yeah. I for most of my life didn't even really remember it. I had blocked it out. I'd repressed these memories, and it was like I knew it happened, but I couldn't remember exactly. I couldn't tell you a story of what happened. I didn't remember it. And then last year I took a shadow work course with an amazing coach, Amber Valdez, and she does a lot of spiritual healing. And she did this shadow work course called Let Your Light Shine Live. And the idea behind this course was being vulnerable in this group of people who were there to be vulnerable. And for the first time ever, I told the story from start to finish. And it was in telling that story from start to finish in this really vulnerable state that I realized I remembered more than I thought I did. And then after telling that story, more and more of these memories would come back. And so this was only like a year ago. And so it's still processing. Yeah. So in terms of talking about it, there's definitely, it was 6 months, and I was not there by my own free will. And there was a lot of abuse and rape and fear. And I thought I was going to die, and I wanted to.
But she escaped.
I did.
Can you share with us the escape story? Because I feel like that's really important.
It was laying there looking at these keys on the sink of this fifth wheel after these men had fallen asleep in their drunken state. And I'm looking at these keys, and everything in my mind is like, just take them and run. Like, now is your chance. And I couldn't make my body do what my mind was telling it to do. And no matter how hard, I was like, willing myself to get up and take these keys, like, just do it.
Yeah.
I couldn't do it. And I think that speaks volumes to the conditioning of people that are, victims of human trafficking. And this is the conditioning and the brainwashing. This is the goal is no matter how bad you want to leave, you won't. And I could feel that happening. And I was come on, just get up. And then I thought to myself, why? Why won't you get up and get these keys? I'm talking to my body at this point. Like, why won't you do this?
You think it was like God and the Holy Spirit in some ways saying, Absolutely. You got to get, like this is your chance.
Absolutely. Yeah. God, my dad, my guides, my guardians, and just come on. And I'm like, why won't you do this? And then the next thought I had was my, terrified little inner child who I've spent my entire adult life trying to just heal and come back to. And she's like, if you do and you get caught, they'll kill you. So laying here is the safe thing to do.
Oh.
And my very next thought was, if you don't, you're going to die anyway. And it was in that thought that I was like, well, body's working now.
Get the keys.
Get the keys. And so I did. And I had never driven a car before. So it was pouring down rain in the middle of the night. I'd never driven a car before. I had no idea where I was. There were no obviously I wouldn't have a cell phone anyway, but there were no cell phones. There's no Google Maps or Google navigation. This is Google Map times.
Oh my.
And so I had no idea where I was, no idea where I was going, no place to really go. And I probably stopped at like 20 gas stations asking for directions. And I probably looked like a homeless, crazy person. And
no one was like, are you sure you're old enough to drive? And no one questioned you.
No. And, when I even look at pictures of me, when I look at pictures of my daughter, I'm like, she clearly looks like a 14, 15-year-old girl. When I look at pictures of me from that age, I'm like, God, I didn't. And maybe it was because of the level I had to step up to changes. I really believe what you feel on the inside changes what you look like on the outside.
Yeah.
And it's not that I looked well beyond my age, but I carried myself beyond my age.
Yeah.
I didn't carry myself with the same timid uncertainty that you see a 14-year-old girl walking around with. And so nobody really, I just looked like a crazy homeless person. So
you're asking for directions, and where are you going?
I am trying to get back to my hometown.
Okay.
Don't really have anywhere to go there, but it's the only place I know and the only place I know people. And so at this point I'm 17.
Oh.
And
you'd been there for 6 months.
About.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. I give or take, but about. And I make it. First time ever driving a car, pouring down rain, middle of the night. I'm driving over. If you've never driven over Mount St. Helena, it is like the windiest, twistiest, turniest, darkest mountain you could possibly drive over.
Oh my gosh.
And
were you driving fast? I mean, maybe you don't remember.
I couldn't tell you. I couldn't tell you the speed I was driving. I know that I could just tell you what it felt like to be behind that wheel. And it felt my heart was going to beat out of my chest.
Yeah.
And I talked to my dad the entire time.
Oh.
And that was like, just get me through this. Just get me through this.
It's almost like a prayer to like you're with me. I need you. Help me.
If you're ever with me, ever be here with me now. And I could feel him there, and I could feel the spirit there. I made myself through. I made myself through there, get over that mountain. And when I did, I got back to my hometown. I definitely tried to go to like the police and go to women's protective services and all of these things. But the problem was when they asked the questions, I didn't have the answers. First of all, I didn't remember practically anything.
Because of the trauma, you just blocked it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And I couldn't have told you, if my life depended on it, where I was. I couldn't have told you how to get there. I couldn't really tell you what happened. And the reality was, this guy was at one point my boyfriend. Oh. So there wasn't a whole lot of anything anybody was willing to do about it.
So these people have never been held accountable.
No. And they likely never will. And while there's a part of me for a long time that wanted that justice to be served, the part of me that needed to be healed let that go in this way of like, I was letting this be a condition of healing. Justice needed to be served before I could heal. And I let that go, and I can heal no matter what. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't easy. It was terrifying and hard. And about 2 weeks after I got back, which getting back from that, like, nobody was looking for me is the thing.
Oh,
like,
my God. That's,
because I moved out at such a young age. My mom,
nobody knew you were kidnapped.
I mean, and nobody was looking for me. I missed all of senior year, and was incredibly depressed. Like, I've struggled with depression all through my 20s, all the way from the time my dad died, all the way in through my 20s. And it just felt like thing after thing after thing that fed it. And I was always in the survival, one foot in front of the other. What's the next move? Back against the wall. What's the next move? And I never, even in the moments of these very intense hardships, did I feel like a victim. I just wanted to be loved. That was it. And so at 17, right after I was back into my hometown, walking around terrified, by the way, like looking over my shoulder wherever I went, like I could barely breathe.
Thinking that they were going to come back and find you.
For sure.
Yeah.
And they could have. And they maybe tried. I don't know. It was scary. I found out I was pregnant. And that was probably one of the single most pivotal emotional moments in becoming the mother I am today. Is all I ever wanted was to be loved. And in being able to love, I could have that love.
Yeah.
And I knew from the time I was a little girl that I wanted nothing more in this world than to be a mom, and that I was going to be such a different mom. My kids were going to grow up so much different than I did, or my mom, or her mom before her. And now I've got this baby inside of me, and there is no way. And it was, if I was already depressed, it took me to suicidal. Because what happened next was something I never thought I'd ever do.
Yeah.
And I held a lot of guilt and a lot of shame. But there was no way that I could have this, a constant reminder of this time in my life that I wanted nothing more than to erase from existence through the pregnancy, when the baby was born. And there was no part of me that could do this. And I didn't. And I got an abortion at 17 years old. And it was the only time that I thought I could go to my mom for something and she would show up, and she did.
Wow.
I went to her house and I went into our living room, and she was standing there, and I said, I have to tell you something. But before I do, I don't want to hear you say anything. I don't want to hear it. I already know what I need to do. I just need your help to do it. And she was like, okay. I said, I'm pregnant. She said, okay. And I said, can you help me? She said, yes. And so she drove me. She paid for it. And I recovered, quote unquote, on her couch. But like I said, I went from depressed to suicidal after that. Because I just carried so much shame and so much guilt and so much sadness and fear and anxiety. And it was like everything from the 17 years of my life had just been compounded into this moment.
I mean, the word suffering comes to mind.
So much suffering.
Yeah.
So much suffering. And it was the first time in my life that I felt like there was no way out of the suffering. There was my whole life had been a back against the wall. What's the next move? Okay, now there's a move. There's 5 more moves to make before your back's against the wall and you can make another move. And this was the first time where my back is against the wall and I couldn't see a move to make. It was no matter which direction I went in, the one thing that I had ever wanted in my life, I just, turned my back on. And so I attempted suicide. And that was a so genuine attempt of suicide. There was nothing more that I wanted in this world than to meet my dad on the other side and to just be loved by the only person that ever made me feel loved, and just be with him and be free of all of this. And I spent my whole life feeling like, and I remember saying it even as a little kid. As a little kid, I used to say that I was a cosmic mistake.
Oh, no.
That there was no place for me in this world. And that I didn't fit anywhere. And nobody wanted me. And nobody wanted my sisters. And even through all of that, I was here and I was going to make the most of it. And I was just done making the most of it. And so I took a Costco-sized bottle of Tylenol and I took a nap. I don't really remember a lot of the trauma that came next after that, the stomach pumping and the emergency room run and I don't really remember. But I woke up in the ICU. Thank God I woke up in the ICU. And I'm still here today. But the first thing I thought when I woke up was not anything good. It was, damn, it didn't work. And I'm still here.
Oh, man, Sara. Where is God and your relationship with God throughout this process? Were you mad at him? Were you like, this... I don't understand this. Some people talk about this, but it feels like you had some understanding that there were spiritual supporters.
I grew to understand that. So when I was 9, so I didn't grow up in church or being taught God or being taught how to connect to God or even that there was any spiritual support. It was just survival. And then when I was about 9, we lived next door to a church, and this church twice a week would have dinner. And the patrons of the church would come and they would come together and they would have dinner at this church. Well, we are starving children. And so dinner sounded really nice. And when we would go to just partake in the food part of this church, we would time and time again get turned away. And that was my first experience with religion.
I was thinking they were going to take you in. Now they turned you away.
Been a much better story. But what it did to my very young, very impressionable mind was say, well, if this is God, I don't want it. And so I held on to that. And I, looking back now, can see how much more loved I could have felt if I would have let myself feel God inside of me. If I would have looked for that instead of looking for it externally.
You had that love. Yeah.
Because that was really what fed my depression, was the unworthiness to be loved. It was this constant search for love from the time I was very, very little up until the time I was actually became a mother. And in this search for love, I'm searching for it externally and I'm looking for it, but it was always there. And had I just known that and somebody helped me see that and showed me how to look for that and connect to that, I can imagine it wouldn't have changed my circumstance, but maybe it would have changed some of the decisions that I made in this quest for love.
I never know. Yeah. But you found it.
I did. And it wasn't until after I became a mom. And I don't know if we have time, but the story of how I became a mom So when I had my daughter, I saw angels. And in that moment, I felt God. I heard God. I saw angels. And it was the first really mystical experience, is the word I'll use to describe it, that I've ever had. And it changed everything. When she was born, when I was in labor with her, the doctors asked me, they said, if she comes out, the way they phrased the question in hindsight is interesting. They said, when she comes out, do you want us to put her on your chest? And I was like, absolutely, I do. And they said to me in reply to that, okay, as long as everything's okay, we will. And so then I give birth to my daughter, who came in this world fast and furious, that one did. And they didn't put her on my chest. They took her away, and she was silent. There was no baby crying, and they took her away, and they didn't put her on my chest. I remember my ex-husband, he was at my head like, are you okay? And I'm like, go to that baby and do not leave her side. Yeah. And so he rushes over, and it's silent. Like you could hear a pin drop in that delivery room. And then all of a sudden you hear her cry. And when she started crying, the entire room filled with light. Like it looked like the sun was rising in the room. The entire room filled with light, and my whole body felt more love than I have ever experienced and could ever. It's then or since. It was like this vibrational, unequivocal, just love, and it was flooded in me, and the room was lit up. And I'm just looking at everybody. I'm like, are you guys seeing this? Are you seeing this? I'm like, nobody knows what the hell I'm talking about.
Hi. Yeah.
And they put that little girl in my arms, and I'm looking at her, and it's bright, and I can see these silhouettes of I can see it. They're angels. And I would also like to state that I was not on any kind of painkillers or drugs when I gave birth to my daughter. It was a natural birth. Okay, yes. And when I held her, it was a thought that came in the form of a voice that was not mine and said, this child will change the world. Everything in me knew that was true. And in that moment, I knew I would never take my own life. I knew that when I left this earth, when I left this planet, it would not be by my own hands. And that my life from then on would be about healing and loving this little girl and being the best version of myself so that I could be there for her. It was in this moment of becoming a mother that I knew, all right, you've been thinking about this your whole life. And if you're truly going to be the mother that this child needs, then you have to figure out how to be in this world and how to be good for yourself and how to heal and how to talk about this and how to move through it and how to make sure that it doesn't define you. Because if it defines you, if your childhood, I was 20 years old when I had her. Wow. And so if your childhood defines you, these are my thoughts, and you are a victim to that childhood, to those experiences for these first 20 years of your life, she's going to grow up no different than you did. It'll be different but the same, just like it was different but the same with my mom and hers. How do you become a better version of yourself? How do you put yourself first? How do you open your heart to spirit? How do you, and that has been my primary, I put everything through that lens my whole life, or my whole adult life.
And that's how you became the mother that you are.
So obviously there's going to be a part 2. Sara Beth, the willful warrior, inspiring you to become the mother that you always needed to be there for your children. Sara Beth is my personal coach. She trains me with physical training. She gives me nutrition. She's helping me get into the best shape of my life. mentally and physically. And she can do the same for you. Check her out, willfulwarrior.com. Sign up. She's offering you, my brave babes, a free meditation to help you just get your mindset on good things. I listen to it on a regular basis. You're going to love it. Check it out and download it. She's the best. willfulwarrior.com. And if you want to go even more and you want to create the life that you've always dreamed of, and you want to figure out how can you become that mother that you always needed and that you want to be for your kids, download my free Brave Life Planner. It's a step-by-step process to help you set your goals, put a date on them, find your pathways to achieve them, and achieve that life you've always wanted. There's a video and there's a printout that goes with that. That's at getyourbraveon.info. Between Sara and I, we're going to make you a brave warrior, girl. Also, I want to say thank you so much to my friends at lifeaudio.com. They have many great podcasts about your faith and prayer and parenting. Check them out at lifeaudio.com. And warrior, get your brave on.